Hello and welcome back to Fallon Moran Radio. Have you ever had an instance where you're like, oh wow, I really wish that somebody would listen to my podcast episodes more or watch my videos longer? Like, have you ever thought to yourself, oh man, everybody talks about increasing the watch time on your video, but how in God's name do I increase the watch time on my content? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to go about this from a different angle than how most typically talk about it, just because I think what's really important is that you understand that there's a difference between conscious coaching and subconscious coaching. And more or less, a lot of people, when they show up online, they're like, oh, approaching from a conscious perspective, like from the level of awareness, where if they're telling you to increase watch time and to increase the retention on any piece of content, any video, then they're coming across it from this whole idea of like, you got to work on your script, or you need to put more time and effort into your topic, or you need to really consider your hook so that you can get somebody's attention and keep somebody's attention. And really, in all honesty, yes, hooks are important to get someone's attention, but the thing about the hook is that the hook is not going to keep someone's attention. We need to create some kind of open loop. And that's where that's what it's ultimately called. We're going to get to that in a minute. But we need to create an open loop for people to feel curious enough to stick around and want to consume longer. So what do we call that? So this is called looping. This is a subconscious tool. This is something that is very incredibly powerful when you use it the right way. Looping, oftentimes when somebody's speaking, is being used and being implemented when they're going through their speech. So, for example, let's say that you're at like a business event, right? And somebody asked you to come be a speaker at their business event, and they're like, I want you to prepare a topic on, because I'm thinking about nutrition, because I just cooked lunch. I want you to talk about the importance of carbohydrates in recovery times after lifting, right? Like, okay. So when we're planning out the speech, we want to have something that's going to kind of be a connector. So like, for instance, have you ever worked out really hard and when you're done, all you wanted to have was a donut, right? So what you're doing is you're creating a commonality, you're creating a common ground. And not only that, you're asking a question. So you're getting people interested, and people are going to be like, yeah, I've lifted really heavy before, and all I wanted after that session was like ice cream and a donut, right? So you're creating a commonality, you're creating like a connection, really, because people can ultimately connect with that example. And when we go to talk about the next line, we go to bring up the next part of our speech, we want to keep it relevant to that question, okay? So we ask a question, we open up the thought gap, the curiosity, like we open people's minds, and then we want to introduce something like your topic, for instance. And you would kind of, after a couple questions, you kind of get to the point of being like, well, this is the importance of carbohydrates when you're recovering from a workout, because those sugar cravings, they're not mystery, right? So what you're doing is you're not only looping back to the initial question of like, have you ever craved a donut? Have you ever craved sugar? You're also now introducing what you're going to be talking about in terms of how carbs influence your recovery time after a heavy lifting session. So now you're going to be going into the body of the speech, where you're going to be talking about the importance of carbohydrates to shuttle the sugars back to the muscle so that it can replace protein and ultimately grow more muscle, right? So that might be really biological for some of you, but you understand where I'm going with this whole outline of a speech, where we open up curiosity, we create a commonality, we create a connection, and then when we're done, we create a loop back and to the beginning from the end of that one little paragraph, and that also loops into the next topic, which is explaining the importance of sugar in recovery time. Now, when you can effectively loop the introduction to the first topic, to the second topic, to the third topic, and then to the final part of your speech, you have aced looping. And when you can loop the final part of your speech back up to the introduction, you have just chef kissed your entire speech. Because ultimately what happens is when you're looping, you're creating open loops, you're creating curiosity gaps. Not only that, you're closing it by providing the topics, but then you're opening it again for the next topic or the next topic or for the conclusion. And then when you can take the conclusion and loop it back to the introduction, then your brain, the people who are listening to you speak, people's brains are going to be so satisfied that they're going to want more. You're going to create an instant, immediate connection with them because you understand them. You understand them from the very beginning when you ask the question of, have you ever craved a donut after you've done a really heavy lifting session? I know I have. And then at the end, when you're done talking about how important it is to shuttle the proteins back to your muscle for, muscle regeneration and muscle growth, then at the end, your final, conclusion part of your speech is, so the next time you crave a donut, don't be afraid to eat one after that lifting session, right? Like immediate closed loop, but it ties right back to the initial question. So when we're going to create content, when we're going to create short form videos, long form videos, podcast episodes, we want to consider the same thing. We want to consider, okay, what's the first initial question that I want to ask for people to get interested, to be curious about what I'm going to be talking about? Then you dive into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the actual video, episode, whatever it might be. And then after that, you want to conclude it. So that way it's seamless. That way you have somebody's attention, but not only you have their attention, you keep their attention. That's the important part, because when we're talking about introducing this into, specifically, I'm thinking of, like a short form video, you want to have somebody's attention for the full 60 seconds. That's going to be the best thing that you can do for short form platforms like Instagram or TikTok. The longer you keep someone's attention, the more your video is going to get pushed. So it's really important to keep those loops open. And then at the end of the video, when you're done making your point, you close the loop. And specifically, again, if you can close it back to the very beginning, you've done a really great job. So I want you to consider and think about this because it's really important. How can you go into your next video and structure it efficiently so that you're not necessarily thinking about it from a script perspective, okay? Because again, that's conscious. That's from a top level of awareness kind of place. And we really want to be creating connection. And that connection is not going to come from the top of your brain. It's going to come from the middle and the inside of your brain. The more you can start to incorporate this tool into your content, the better off I promise you are going to be. Now, if you're really paying attention, you're going to start to see the pattern here, and you're really going to start to notice it because I'm doing it exactly right now. So the next time you go to create a piece of content and you're thinking to yourself, how can I possibly increase the watch time on my content? This is exactly how you can do it, by introducing loops, introducing open loops, and then closing the loop and tying it back to the very beginning so that people really truly lock in what you are talking about, okay? I hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't wait to see you use this in your next video, in your next podcast episode, in your next piece of content. be sure to send me. I want to see the video. You could send it to me. You could send it to me in a DM on Instagram, on TikTok, I don't know that you could DM on YouTube, but I want to see what your content is when you introduce this looping method. So I can see like, okay, yeah, I see how you did that. I see where you were looping this to that. And please, if you found this really helpful, be sure to share this episode with your community, because I know they can use this tidbit, they can use this method and this subconscious tool to help them with their journey online. And not just online, like this is something that you can even use when you're going to give a speech in front of I don't know how many people at an event. And it will make people come up to you. You will have questions. People will connect with you, and they're going to want to. I cannot guarantee that they're going to want to work with you, but I know that they're going to feel that connection, and they're going to want to talk to you further. I am so grateful for you continuing to tune into the podcast and continuing to listen. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay, thanks. Love you. Bye.